This is the Art of Network Engineering podcast. In this podcast, we'll explore tools, technologies, and talented people. We aim to bring you information that will expand your skill sets and toolbox and share the stories of fellow network engineers. Welcome to the Art of Network Engineering. I am AJ Murray at No Blinky Blinky, and tonight I am joined by Kevin, the man, the myth, the mustache. Kevin, thanks for joining me. No, I don't think you can now. I don't think you're gonna be able to shave that off. I think we need to get a sticker of just that mustache so people can put that on the laptop. You know,
some swag stuff for Cisco Live. I like it.
Oh yeah, we can absolutely do that. So you're definitely attending Cisco Live.
Yep. For sure.
All right. I know that we are going to try to get additional members of the AONE team out there to Cisco Live this year. I'm not sure who. Hopefully, all of us would be great, but I'm not sure how realistic that is. So if you're definitely going to be there, and if no one else gets a chance to, we are going to send you with some AONE swag.
Cool.
And we also have little wireless mics that we can send you as well, so that way you can do some interviews with folks on the floor, create some content, and send it back. We can add it to some shows and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
But outside of the podcast, how you doing? What's keeping you busy these days?
I'm doing well. Today I was looking into that AT&T outage, that very mysterious AT&T outage. And it's been fun listening to all the conspiracy theories. All these people who are not technical whatsoever thinking about, is it aliens and is it Russia? Who could be causing this big outage? That's been fun.
Well, if AT&T had their tinfoil hat on, they probably would have been protected.
Well, I'm sure they want to blame anyone other than themselves right now. So they might be the source of all those conspiracies. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was really curious. So I'm an AT&T customer, as is my wife. We're on a family plan. She happens to be traveling this week. She's in Orlando for a conference. And when I woke up this morning, she texted me. She's like, "Hey, my phone's not working." And I'm like, "Mine isn't either." And it's just
gotta be tech support, even you're not in the same state. You gotta be tech support.
Yeah, all the time. And so it's like, well, the bill's paid. I'm not sure what's going on. And then we're both scrolling the internet and come across that there's been an outage since like 4:00 in the morning, and it went until 3:30 this afternoon. Mm-hmm. So almost a 12-hour outage. It's just absolutely crazy. That was also a chunk of my day, just kind of curious. And you're right. I mean, listening or reading people in the people's thoughts in the Discord it's all about the Dream Discord. There was a lot of great hypotheses about what was going on. Obviously, DNS was the number one.
DNS and BGP.
And BGP, yep. Close behind. I was talking to Stub Area 51 in the Discord, and I thought it was interesting. If it is a peering problem, apparently they still turn the radios off on the 5G networks. And it's just like, wow, I would have thought they would have left the radios on and maybe still let some phone calls go through, particularly local E911. But apparently all
pretty important stuff.
It's all IP based these days. So no peering, no worky. No blinky, as I like to say.
There you go. Further proof that networking is still needed. You still need network engineers.
Yes. Yeah, you flip one bit and it goes from networking to not working.
I love it.
Good stuff. Well, I am very excited about our guest tonight. I have been talking to Ian for a very long time, and he was gracious enough to uproot his life and change to fit our clock. I know it is very early in the morning for him, but Ian is the man behind the My Mind's Madness account on Twitter. He posts a ton of great CCNA content, and he's on other social media platforms as well. Ian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for bending your clock and spending some time with us tonight.
Cheers for having us along. Really excited to be here.
Before we really kick anything off, I have got to ask you, why My Mind's Madness? Where did that come from as the name for the account?
I mean, I know I definitely have like a branding issue with my Minds Madness. It happened around COVID, and it was just meant to be a place where I would dump all my ideas for things like I do music, I do networking, I do woodworking, and it was just meant to be like this kind of place I could dump all that kind of stuff. And it just turned into networking only. I don't know why. Like I just really enjoyed it. I found this community, and it just kind of took off. And I've really enjoyed having it be my Minds Madness. And yeah, it's just stayed as a networking platform ever since in my mind. So it was meant to be something else, but I'm happy with what it is now. So
I love it. I'm not certainly not being critical of it. I absolutely love it. I was just wondering where that came from, and that makes a lot of sense. And I really enjoy what you're doing with it.
To be fair, I mean, there's a lot of madness going on up there, so it seemed apt.
So for our listeners and anybody watching on the live stream, where on this big, beautiful blue globe are you located?
I'm based in Scotland.
All right.
And I was recently out at Glencoe doing some skiing. If you've been following us on Twitter.
Yes, I have. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it was a really, really nice trip out there. And we were lucky as well because the chairlift broke like the day we went home. So so got my skiing in before that happened. But yeah, out in the UK, born in England, lived in Scotland for pretty much most of my life. And yeah, that's kind of where I am in the world. And it's absolutely beautiful. I love Scotland. Like it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. Like pick any direction other than east and drive and I'll hit just beautiful scenery wherever I go, so it's amazing. So
all right, so I've been to Glasgow and I've been to Edinburgh. Where are you?
I'm on the Edinburgh side of the country.
Okay.
And I'm just a bit further up north by about 60 miles in a place called Dundee.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So I used to work for a company that had a large presence over in the UK. We had a couple locations in England, and then we had a location up in Glasgow. And I had a very rare but very fun opportunity to take a train from Peterborough up to Edinburgh, hop to another train, and then head out to Glasgow.
Yeah.
And that was a ton of fun. And I even spent 24 hours in Glasgow, and I don't remember a lot of it.
That sounds about right. That's how most stories in Glasgow go. Yeah.
So fun times.
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead.
I was just going to say they're both like absolutely beautiful cities as well. Glasgow gets a rough time for being rough, but it's still a beautiful city.
Absolutely.
Again, like you meet some of the friendliest people there as well. So.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so let's go back. How did you get into networking? What happened that kind of pushed you into the direction of working with all these ones and zeros?
Well, I certainly had no interest in it. That's how the story starts.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. When I was in school, computing was an optional course. It was mandatory in your first 2 years of like our secondary school, but then after it was optional, and I dropped it like a lead balloon. So it held no interest for me at the time. To be fair though, like it was IT, so it was more about like, learning how to use Word and Excel more than it was computing, if you get what I mean. So I didn't have a good introduction to it. I could play games, happy with consoles and stuff, but that was about as far as my interest went. When I was leaving school, I wanted to get into making guitars and doing luthiery. And then when that fell through, because there's nowhere in the UK that did it. I just kind of dossed around for a little while, doing like odd jobs, working in bars, restaurants, and even a call center for a while. And then I think it was the work in the call center was the last job that I had before I actually got into networking. And it's because I got quite friendly with the IT guy there, and we I just helped him out on a couple roles. And I remember once he asked me to go around and like grab all the IP addresses off the devices because they were all written on top at the time. So I went around, grabbed everything, came back and went, they're MAC addresses. Go again. Off I went. So yeah, did that. And I sadly, I was made redundant from the call center. And at that point, I was probably quite low, but my dad was like, hey, there's an open day at the local college. Why don't you just go check it out? And I happened across a table where a chap, I'll never forget him, Alan, was sitting right there. It's like, you could try computing, like, some courses here. And I said, cool, how do I sign up? Like, what's the deal? And it's like, go home tonight, sign up for the course that you're interested in, and then come back on Thursday, which this was a Tuesday that I was in their building. He's like, come back on Thursday for induction day. I was like, cool. Must have been desperate for some people. So I went away and I signed up for, first was software development, because I thought when I'd worked in the call center, I'd worked on GUIs. I was like, these could be better. So I was in that kind of mindset. Maybe I could design better, being, having been a user, maybe I could do better for the users. So that was my kind of initial thought. Signed up for game development as well, and then graphic design, because why not? So no networking at all yet. Walked into the induction day on Thursday, was getting ready to start the classes, and then this guy called Jerry walks into the room and just basically said, thinking of running a third stream of networking. It's the most difficult course we have to offer, but we go through all of the Cisco NetAcad content in that time. And if anyone's interested, we're just looking to get some more numbers into that course. I firmly kept my hand down. I still wasn't interested. For him on his last ditch effort, was just like, there's more money in networking. Oh yeah, go on, I'll give that a shot. So into networking I went, and I'm so glad, because I've never looked back after that. And I think I remember the first time that I truly fell in love with it was when I configured my first static route, like just a default route on Packet Tracer. But just doing that, it's like, I can make A talk to B, no matter how far away they are. and I think that's what spurred my interest. And then as I've got more and more into it, I've just fell in love with it, because networking is a purely logical endeavor. And I've always been a fan of logic puzzles. Like, you get these Einstein logic puzzles where it's like, okay, Frank has a hat and he's from the States, and you have to solve those, and they're fun to do. And Sudokus, they're nice. And networking is just about that kind of stuff. If you can sit down and figure out the logic behind things, then that's networking. So I found that I've fallen more and more in love with that as time's gone on, and went through all the content. And the Cisco NetAcad content at the time when I was studying it, which would have been like 2011, 2012, that was quite routing switch heavy at the time. So even I think at the time you were doing like OSPF with, message digest hash, and getting all that kind of stuff between them. So you've got secure neighbor messages being sent back and forth. So stuff that isn't even touched in the CCNA anymore, and I just fell in love with the content and the way that it was delivered, and this cool piece of software that was Packet Tracer, and played around a ton on Practical Kit. The college that I went to had a full lab that we could play with, which was really good. And yeah, I just fell more and more in love with it. And now here I am, good 12, 13 years later, still doing it.
That's great. So you did Cisco Net Academy. Did you get your CCNA at Net Academy?
No. I did, when you finish NetAcad, if in the last semester, and this still applies now, actually, if in the last semester you score 75% or more in the final written exam, you can get a 50% discount voucher to go sit your CCNA.
Okay. All right.
So I do remember qualifying for that and not sitting it in the period of time that I had to renew the voucher. Because when you finished semester 4, or the fourth course at the end of the college year, and then went into summer, and I just kind of dove straight into work at that point and got a placement. So I was more learning the job than I was more interested in getting the certification at that time.
Gotcha.
So kept working. I think a year out of college, though, I passed my CCNA. It was part of my kind of plan to move forward. So yeah. I did go on to pass it shortly after, but it wasn't within the college that I did it.
Gotcha. So what was the first job out of college then?
The college itself hired some soon-to-be ex-students to do like the IT refresh, effectively, like hauling out just computer after computer into rooms, laying them out, putting the mice and keyboards down, all that kind of stuff, plugging them in and installing the operating systems. We used to have to go around with, like 2 USB sticks between us to install the operating systems into all these hundreds of PCs, taking old ones down. I always found that one quite funny though, because when you first start out, I remember we were loading up a trolley and like the max we would put on is like 10 PCs, and we're going like snail pace along the corridor, pushing these 10 PCs on a trolley. Like, don't dare crash. Like this thing falls off. That's like my entire wages packet. Like, I'm not going to do that. So, you're being really, really careful. And then by the end of the second month that you're doing it, you're walking along with like a leaning tower of PCs, this is fine. Just running down the corridor, get them in, get them loaded. So, I find that fun, but that was my first job. So it was a placement, which didn't pay fantastic. I had to actually take a pay cut to do it because I was working as a barista through college. And because I could work more hours as a barista than I could doing the summer placement. I actually had to take a gamble and be like, all right, well, this is less money that I'm going to earn because I can't work 12 hours a day. Sorry. So yeah, I ended up taking a small pay cut on that. But after that, I got my first kind of proper job, I'd say, in IT rather than a summer placement. And that's when I got a service desk engineer role. I know we all kind of like the entry in the service desk. So,
Trial by fire.
Yeah. That was one of the weirdest interviews I've ever had, though.
Well, guy, tell us more about that.
Good story. Good story coming.
So the company that it was a data center, and basically their service desk had pretty much just been poached by another company in Dundee. And so they were losing quite a few members and quite quickly had to replenish the team. So they did this kind of mass employment drive where all one morning, about 20 odd people walked into this hotel, reception, and, there was bacon rolls, coffee, everything that you could, fill your boots with, and then pulled everyone into a little room. And they gave us like a one-to-one with the CEO, well, not one-to-one, sorry, one-to-many with the CEO, telling us what they were trying to do, what they accomplished, what the goal was for the day. And then we all got broken into like 4 little groups, and we had to go off and do separate tasks. So one of them was just for half an hour, there was going to be 1 to 2 interviews between like a current member of the service desk and one of the HR folk. And it would just be that kind of one-on-one thing. Then there was a practical assessment that we had to do. And I remember that because you're sitting at this laptop. It's like, what's the serial number of this laptop? And I'm staring for a second. No one's doing anything. And I lifted the laptop up to look on the back of it. And then moments later, the 2 guys beside me did the same. I was like, okay, I'm on the right path here. But I even remember in that one, there was even one which is like, it broke down like what's your familiarity with different operating systems. So like, what's commands in Windows for this? What's commands on Cisco for this? What's commands in Linux to this? And at the time, like I could only remember LS. I don't know. LS. There we go. That'll do. So did the practical. Then we had to do a group kind of troubleshooting thing where we all had to sit together as a team, and then they would ask us the most random of questions, like train leaving Edinburgh to London is traveling at 56.3 miles an hour. Train leaving London to Edinburgh is traveling 61.2 miles an hour. How fast when will the other train catch up with the first one if they keep going back and forth? And the aim of the questions is that they were absolutely ridiculous. Without any aid of computer, you're never going to be able to solve them, really. But they were just more interested in like, how do you approach the problems? And so, like I say, some of the questions were really, really good in that sense. And you had to really think about how you would solve that problem logically. So even just that train one, for instance, the train from Edinburgh to London would reach London before the train was able to overtake it in any way, because it just wasn't going fast enough for the amount of miles it would cover. So you had an answer in that sense already. But yeah, that was just weird. But whilst that was going on, every 2 minutes...
Wait, there's more.
There's more, yeah. I told you, it's weird. Every 2 minutes, someone in the group had to stand up and go pull a Post-it off a wall, and that Post-it just said one word on it, right? And you had to vamp for what that word was. So I remember I got birds, I just had to talk about birds for 30 seconds solid. Like,
that's so bizarre.
Yeah. And it's the weirdest thing I've ever done. But again, I think it was just more that, like, how'd you handle pressure? How can you come up with stuff? And can you still sound knowledgeable as you're doing it, even if you're under a lot of pressure? And they were simple topics. I mean, like I say, it was birds, but it's just very, very weird how they made you do all these steps. And yeah, I got that job, thank God. I would have hated to go through all of it to not get the job. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, very, very weird one that. But on the service, sorry.
So you said at one point you were doing a team project. Was this like you working with the folks that work there, or was this everybody who was interviewing for this spot had to work together as a team?
Everyone who was interviewing for the spot had to work together as a team.
That is so weird.
Yeah.
And were they hiring the group themselves? Like all the people in the group would be hired?
I mean, they were planning on hiring a few people. It didn't mean that the people in your group would also be employed. And so
weird. Yeah.
Again, it was one of those, how'd you work in a team? What kind of role did you take on in that scenario? Do you become a leader? Do you become a follower? That kind of stuff.
I'm curious. So you worked with those people because you got the job, right?
Yeah.
Would you say the people they hired that was like effective, that people were good?
On the first round of employment, they only hired 2 people, one of which was a mate of mine, but he sadly had to leave just for personal circumstances. So it was just me.
So inconclusive. Got it. Yeah. I hired you, which is A+.
Yeah.
What about the other people that worked there? Did they have to go through that same process?
They never did anything similar again. It was a kind of trial run. Like, let's see if this works. But
I can't imagine why.
It obviously took them an entire morning. It was very weird. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I guess if you need to replenish an entire team of people, then maybe you try something different, see if it works.
Yeah.
You know?
Hunger Games. Just
I feel like the Hunger Games might have been more effective. I think so. In particular. I mean, no, I get it. It's logical, right? Like you want to see how people work in a team. You want to see how they think on their feet and under pressure. Like that checks all the boxes there. And that's definitely more than what you might learn in a typical interview. So I understand and see the reasoning for it, but wow, like what a strange process.
I would hate to be the hiring manager. That just, that would just kill my day right there.
And I feel like something stupid would be like, well, that guy did a much better impression of a bird than the other guy. So it's like, what exactly are you being evaluated on here?
I have heard rumors of like other kind of like mass employment drives where they do something similar, where like they can do something as simple as like someone will come over and like put your hand on your shoulder, like, you can go home now. Like that would be harsh, right? Like I'm glad they didn't do that, but it's
we're done here. Wow, brutal.
Yeah, but the service desk job itself was awesome. Like because you were also other than just being service desk and kind of dealing with requests on server side and like dealing with backups and restores and DNS entry requests and all this kind of stuff, you were also the first line for our tickets coming in. So when that was happening from either our alerting system or from customers, we were just on that front line of responding to all those requests. And it was good because it gave me a more general view of everything that's going on in my environment. It's not just about the network. It is about the Linux server. It is about the other elements of the infrastructure that you're there to support as a network engineer. So it made me understand those a bit more from a hardware perspective, an OS perspective. So that was good. I enjoyed that. But the advantage is I could see every ticket going through to the network guys. And to me, that was where I wanted to sit. It was a very big open office space. And I knew I wanted to be sitting in those seats where these 4 other guys were. And I basically just went along and said, right, I want to be coming over here. I know a bit of networking. Can we set up maybe read-only access to some of the equipment so that when a networking ticket comes through, I can like pre-work on it, give you what I think my change request would be, write it all up for you, and then send it on the way to you guys, and maybe save you some time and work. And I spoke to my team, which had populated to more than just me at the point. said, hey guys, any networking tickets that come in, like fire them my way first so I can have a quick look at them, and then I'll pass them on from there. And the basic rule was anything that wasn't a P1 could come through me first, and I could have a stab at it. I would never be able to change anything. I'd just have to write up what I thought the request would be or what the commands would be, then fire it onto the network guys. And then when a space came up, you're like, well, Ian's been doing really well at working on all this, so why don't we get him to come here and we'll do a secondment. So I got seconded into the network team for a little while, got given a project to work on, and after the successful completion of that, that's when I got full-time moved over to the networking team. So that was awesome.
Now, did you have to convince your management or your leadership to have you do that? Because you're taking away your responsibilities from your other duties.
I didn't have to do it personally. I just had to give, a convincing argument that I'd be able to handle it, and I think the way that it worked, I was over a 2-week period. I'd have to do in 1 week, 3 days on the service desk, 2 days on network, and then following week it'd be flipped. So overall, they were all getting 5 days out of me over the course of 2 weeks. So as long as I made sure that my work wasn't slipping on the service desk, and if at any point there was any requirement for me to stay on the service desk, like maybe there was a P1 that meant I had to help do some of the work and some of the comms, I would have to jump back onto the service desk. So I was there kind of beck and call if I needed to. But
that makes sense. Yeah. That's great that you had the backing of your management and leadership actually let you explore that, because I know a lot of places won't.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. The company that I work for, they were very big on like, this is a family run kind of shop. So they appreciated that effort. And like I say, it was just a big open office space, which I know like Andy doesn't like. He likes his quiet room to have it, which is I love that myself now that I'm in the role. But at the same time, at the time, it was a great opportunity for me to be able to just turn around, walk over and ask these experts questions on networking, and then just kind of go back to my desk and carry on. So it was really great for my own development in that front, being in such close quarters to these people, and to be able to make an impression with them and saying like, look, I want to come into this team. What do I need to get there? And start doing work and make their lives a bit easier. I mean, that was one of the other things that I was able to say when I was on this comment. It's like, well, I've already been doing a lot of the work because I'm writing some of the change requests up and sending them on anyway. So it's not massive. It's not going to make a massive difference. It's just that now I'll actually have some permissions that I can make these changes, which will be fun.
Yeah, that makes sense. That kind of echoes to how I was in the knock, and I got promoted there from following the tickets and, actually looking at the networking tickets, seeing what they solved and escalating it there. And so that, I think people who are in the help desk or knock positions, they get kind of overloaded with tickets and they just try to do their job. And I think if you do it the right way, where you want to have a goal and get promoted, that's exactly how you do it. So That's awesome.
I think there's some danger when you're in the service desk of you have a KPI to meet, which is like get this many tickets responded to in such a space of time. You don't have time to spend 15 extra minutes on a case. And that can be very detrimental to that progression in that sense. If you're having to spend that time just making sure you meet those KPIs, that can be detrimental.
Good point.
If you are in that opportunity where you can spend even just 10 minutes, that can help, and that can help you progress. And that 10 minutes of showing interest can do wonders for your own progression in that sense as well.
Yeah, not even the skills that you're learning, but the people who you're escalating to.
Yeah.
They see your name.
The questions that you ask.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when it comes time to interview and they see your name, it's like, oh, I know that guy. He's good.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So where'd you go from there?
From the network engineering role at the data center, I then got into teaching.
Now, how'd you make that jump? What was the reasoning for that?
When I was at college and I'd been working with my lecturers, Simon and Chris and Alan, I'd just seen what fun and how enjoyable and how rewarding it must have been to be teaching. And I remember saying to Chris, my lecturer, that I want to come back here in like 10 years time. I want to come and teach I want to go out, get experience, come back and teach. And then he just happened to reach out to me about 8 years early into that plan and said, I'm
desperate
leaving.
now. No,
Yeah. He was saying,
worse.
I'm leaving to go to another university, and you'd expressed an interest. I think you'd be a good opportunity for you here. So if you want, apply, and I'll kind of back you if you want. So I went for the application. That interview was much more easy. But
no trains.
Yeah, well, no trains. This one, I had to do a presentation on like collision domains, and the presentation would have been to someone who was technical, and then the person in HR. I was like, well, I need to aim this at the person at HR. They need to be able to walk out of this meeting understanding. Like, doesn't matter if I like go so technical that the person who is technical understands it to a massive degree. I need it to go basic, so the person who doesn't know what it is, will understand it by the time we come out. And I think I ended up just using like the old traffic light system, so like two cars going bang, traffic lights control. But yeah, that interview was fine. And then I started teaching, and I got into teaching NetCAD I was doing that for 8 years. And
So teaching was your full-time job?
Full-time job, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So it wasn't like a part-time evening class. Like that's what you did full-time.
Yeah.
Wow. I loved it that much that you left your engineering job. Yeah. I was like, nope, I am now a teacher.
Yeah. And like the thing I'll say about teaching, it was both the best and worst thing I ever did.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Yeah, it was the best because, again, what I'd seen, that rewarding behavior of like being able to teach people new things and have them develop and grow, to the point where even recently, I was actually just out for drinks with my dad, and an old student came up and was like, thank you. Like, you're the reason why I'm buying a house this week. And that's like, when you get kind of feedback like that, that is genuinely, it warms your heart. You just feel fantastic for knowing that you've helped someone progress and develop in that way. Mm-hmm. And for the first few years, because I only left with a HND, so I've not been to university, so I didn't have a master's or a bachelor's or anything. I just had like one of the lower levels. I found out that I apparently should not have been teaching the level that I was teaching at, because I had to have one over. So for the first 3 years anyway, I went through like all the kind of qualifications that the college required me to go through. So, my teaching qualification, all this kind of stuff. So I got all that done. In that time, my CCNA did expire, but I had to renew it anyway. But it was at the kind of end of that 3-year mark when I kind of got a bit more of a taste that my personal development wasn't as important as the development they wanted me to do, kind of thing. So for the entire time through this 3 years, I was saying, like, after this, I want to kind of aim for my CCNP. I was studying it before I came to teach. I want to go for that. And then, it's government run facility, budget cuts happens, like, we can't really afford a £200 exam. So, okay. So it kind of, after you break your back working for a company and then you find out they're not going to support you in quite the same way, it hurts your feelings a bit, really, the most. But didn't mean I didn't take advantage of what they did have to offer, which was some good stuff. Because after the 3 years and after this kind of point in around 2018, where I was like, I started becoming unhappy teaching. Like, the teaching part, fine. It was everything else in the background and not developing. You're not live troubleshooting. You're not doing things on bigger networks, and teaching, you kind of rinse and repeat every year. Like, I was teaching NetCAD semester 1, 2, 3, 4 at first, and then turned into 3. And then academic year starts again, and you just go back to the beginning, 1, 2, 3. And I was starting to get a bit bored of that repetition. I found like different ways to deliver the content and did all these different kind of things, but that was just purely for my own benefit to keep it interesting, And I think it was around that time where I probably started getting worried about how I go into industry after this, or how I get back into industry. Because 4 years in to teaching, like, that's terrible. Like, I might as well have not been in industry at all anymore, because I think that's when my kind of what I now have, which is imposter syndrome, I think that's when that started developing. I don't know, everyone says imposter syndrome because it's just one of those things, isn't it? But I genuinely felt in that kind of, even at 2018, I was like, if I tried to go back into industry, I'm going to have to take either a significant pay cut and go right back down to the bottom to work my way back up, maybe quickly, but that's maybe what I'm going to have to do. Or I'm going to have to like really, really sacrifice like my family time and spending time at home and getting this kind of quality life that I've built now. And that might have meant me maybe traveling a bit further down south and having a larger commute so I can maybe get a better wage, but spend more time traveling. You never know. And one thing I decided to do though was, as I mentioned, because I only had a HND, I needed to have the level above to be able to teach HND, apparently. So one of the things that you can do in Scotland is they have something called a graduate apprenticeship. And cool thing about that is as long as your company that you work for is willing to give you 1 day a week to go do this course, you can go and do a bachelor's or a master's for free, which is the best part about it.
Wow.
Like,
yeah.
And again, I can't flaw Scotland's education system for that. Like the fact that I can get my bachelor's for free is phenomenal. You know, I think when you look at the bill, it's like 1 penny. So, but it's done by Skills Development Scotland. Like, you know,
I'll take that deal. Jeez.
Yeah. So basically 1 day a week, I started traveling down to Glasgow and I got my bachelor's in cybersecurity. And then that was now an extra 3 years on top. So now we're in like 2022. And that's when I finally made the move and left the college as a teacher and went back out into industry.
Now, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why cybersecurity? Was that just because that was the closest to networking, or were you just pointed towards security at that point?
I mean, we were pointed towards secure. I mean, I have interest in it. I'm a network engineer. Security and networking go hand in hand. It's not like the two are two completely different fields of study. So we knew that at the college, we were developing cybersecurity courses as well. So it would be beneficial for me to have that anyway. But in general, one, it was an interesting topic. I've now found that I'm not interested. I'm still more interested in tech now at this stage of my career. So it's not like I'm trying to pass these things away. But yeah, I was more interested in, and cybersecurity, it is a phenomenal subject to kind of get into and sink your teeth into in general. And yeah, I think I did do 3 years on that course and learned a ton. I did have to go through NetAcad again, which was kind of funny. Like,
you taught it,
even though you were teaching it.
Yeah, I had to go through the first semester, and I got to the end of it. I went to the lecturer, so I was just like, by the way, like I've done this. Like I done it so much that I even teach it every year. Like I could tell you what the answers to the questions are. So I could tell you what the questions are. That's how much I know. So yeah, I was at that point, and I did manage to get those units like just carried over. I think I had to sit like some kind of fast track course thing, but basically I just sat the exam. It's like, yeah, you're fine. You don't need to come to this class. But the downside of that was I still had to travel to Glasgow though that one day to go to class. And then I'd get like a 2-hour break whilst everyone else went to networking. And then I had to go back into the other class. So it didn't save me any time.
So what was the job after teaching?
The job after was actually a cybersecurity engineer for a telecoms company. And it was my shortest role I've ever had.
Okay. All right. Before we get to that, while you were interviewing for that role, and I bring this up
There's
because
no birds.
Zetharian on the live chat on YouTube brought up a great point. The education experience had to be good for the resume. So in that position, and I guess the future positions we'll talk about, what was the reaction from the people you were interviewing with about you teaching? Well, I mean, I assume it's got to be like great, but curious.
Well, that was kind of a point. So in 2018, when I had that thought, like I'm either going to have to go all the way back to the beginning or try something else. The thought was to buffer my resume by getting my master or my bachelor's in cybersecurity. So I thought, if I can't get the industry experience, then maybe this might help me. Now, it was a weird sidestep for me because I've always been a proponent of experience over education. As a teacher, it's a weird one for me to say, but you gain more from experience in scenarios than you do from reading a book. That's just as simple as it is. And at that point, I was like, but cybersecurity is still a very new field in that sense. And some of the best jobs are all requiring a bachelor's or something in cybersecurity, because it's some evidence of experience in the field, which is still very new. So it was a good shout for me on that front to go for cybersecurity, so that I had, recent and relevant knowledge on cybersecurity, which enabled me to kind of go for that next role and get out and be earning a greater wage than I was teaching.
And so when you were interviewing, did they have any comment? Were they impressed at all by your experience as a teacher?
Some places were, because the idea of being able to pass knowledge down was desirable. So there's a few places that I interviewed for where that was a good thought. Some places didn't like it so much, for the same fear that I had, that it was a case of what industry experience is relevant for you at the moment. Like, have you touched this? Have you touched that? No, I've touched it in labs, but no more. And sometimes it backfired on me, which is entirely what I anticipated it to do all the time.
Okay. All right.
Did you find yourself shoehorned into training? I was a teacher for a couple years in high school, and I found myself always being picked to be the trainer of the new guy or whatever. They knew I had experience there, so I'm curious.
It's not something that has been apparent in my jobs after, but it's certainly something that I know the company I currently work for like me for. I like teaching, so when there is someone who wants to learn something new, I'll be like, yeah, come on. Like, my day's chocker, but I will spend 15 minutes right now. Let's do it, So I do like doing that, and I try my best to make sure I'm sharing my knowledge as much as possible, which is, again, kind of what happened with my Mind's Madness. I had information that I wanted to get out there and thought, hey, this could be a good way to do it. So I like sharing things. I like helping others. And so it's not that I'm getting pushed into a teaching role. I still enjoy doing it.
Yeah, that's gonna be my next question is, are you getting that outlet through your website and being able to, pass the knowledge on? Is that like what it is? Is that just you want to get that outlet for your passion to the masses?
Pretty much. Like, I mean, my Mind's Madness really started off with just kind of, I called them cheat sheets, but they were just infographics, that I had up. And I think my favorite one, for certainly at the CCNA level, was just routers like high numbers, switches like low numbers. Like, just if you have a protocol, like, I remember I've sat the CCNA exam like 3 times at this stage, and I know fine well, and one of the first times I sat it, the worst questions I had were like, oh, there's an election process happening on this device. What's it gonna like more than the other, And I remember freezing up. It's like, oh crap, like, is it the lowest MAC address? Is it the highest MAC address? Is it the lowest IP? Is it the highest IP? And when I kind of got to that point of like, routers like high numbers, so IP layer 3 high numbers work really, really well, and layer 2 down, it's low numbers. If you can remember that, then chances are you're going to get the question right. It's not a rule that's held fast in the higher levels of your certifications. There are other ones where routing takes a lower number, but for your CCNA level, it's pretty much ubiquitous. It works. So
yeah. I took out your cheat sheets and I love them. I like how you can equate it to just basic everyday things, like subnetting is a pizza.
Yeah.
Love that one. I think there was some traffic diagrams and that kind of stuff on there too. And I know that a lot of people respond very well to that. That's how I learn.
Yeah.
I have to have an image in my head and kind of put it in terms that I understand in my everyday life. So they're great. I definitely recommend them.
Well, another favorite was one that I had to get John Capiabanco to check, because I was like, this seems too simple to be correct. Yeah. And it was just simply like the idea of having your centralized management for your controller. And it was like, had an image of a person in the brain thinking, I want to move my arm. Fantastic. And then the next to it was just the brain was outside the head, like Simon says, move your arm. It's like, that's perfect. It works. I was like, oh, thank God. I thought that was just really too simplistic,
That's great. So I want to bounce back to your cybersecurity engineer role and why that was the shortest role you've had.
It just wasn't as advertised. Like, as I'd said, during teaching, I'd been missing troubleshooting. I'd been missing getting my hands dirty, doing practical work. And that's what this role was kind of promised to be. And when I got into it, it was just more like fill out this presentation so that I can take it to the board later on. I was like, okay, that's not as good as what I wanted. And I will give them the due. When I pointed that out during my probation period, they were like, well, maybe we can do something to assuage your feelings on that front. But at that point, I was just a bit like, I've had this taste here. I'm not quite as happy as I wanted to be. I wanted something a bit different. So I think I'd already made my mind up, really. But I do respect that they took their time to say, we really enjoy having you here. Like, you do a good job. We're sorry it's not been technical enough, but what can we do? You know, so I did appreciate that.
So how long were you there?
3 months.
3 monts. Wow.
Like, literally the end of my probation, I was like a week before.
The door didn't even finish closing on the way in.
And I say it's a shame because the things that I could have done from the cybersecurity perspective, like there could have been a lot of, you know, career progression in cybersecurity. Instead, I'm now in a knock, but I'm in a knock that deals a lot with security anyway. So we're kind of becoming a SOC in ourselves as well. So I don't feel like I've hindered myself. I just feel like I've got myself in a better position where I get to get my hands dirty and also get to work on my knowledge and develop myself as well.
You know, though, kudos to you for identifying early on that this just isn't working out, right? Like, why, if you can tell now 3 months in that this is as good as it's going to get and it's not where I need it to be, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I know there's a lot of critics that will say, like, oh, you know, if you bounce around too much on your resume, it's not going to look good. And it's just like, if you have a perfectly valid reason for not wanting to be there, move on.
I think the joy on my front there is, like, I had 8 years at the same place behind me. Yeah. So it's not as if I was bouncing around. There just genuinely wasn't a nice fit, like you say. And it wasn't working for me. So I made that decision, moved on.
Yeah. I have a similar experience at a past job. I only spent 3 months there. And it was because the bill of goods I was sold was not as delivered when I started working there. And quite frankly, there was this really weird counterculture that existed at the organization where, you know, you get on a call and it felt like literally you would get on a call and everyone would be like, hey, did you see so-and-so who's not on this call right now? Did you hear how they completely screwed up XYZ? And it's just like, this is horrible. Yeah. What kind of a team culture is this? It's not like this is
blame culture is the worst.
Yeah. And you know, I thought it was like a one-off thing, but it happened on every single call I joined. And it's like, you know what? This isn't for me.
Nah, quite right.
I think the probation period goes both ways. You know,
absolutely.
You're on probation, but you're also evaluating the company.
That's entirely right. Like, it's entirely what I've based my decision on anyway. It's like, I've been evaluating this 3 months. I've got an opportunity to get out with a minimal notice before I have to, like, sign up for a 3-month notice period or something. Like, do I want to stay doing this job for significantly longer if I'm not enjoying it currently? Like, so yeah, I'm glad I took the opportunity, because you are entirely right. It's your opportunity to assess the role as well. So in that probation, I personally think if I was an employer, if someone said I left in probation because it wasn't a good fit, that's a good reason to leave rather than
for sure. So, I would think that would be a benefit. You know, like, hey, this person knows what they want and they're not afraid of taking risks too. So that's awesome.
So I want to talk about that for a minute, because that's a very big cultural difference between the UK and the US. I am familiar with the 3-month thing that you just brought up, where you have to give your employer 3 months notice before you're allowed to leave and move on to your next position. And I think some of that has to do with it gives them time to find your replacement, you to potentially train your replacement. And it is a very different thing here in the US. I mean, the expectation is that you give a 2-week notice, but most places are at will employment. And, you know, so I think a lot of the times, particularly with IT positions, when you give notice, you're let go usually same day or by the end of that week, because you have administrative control. There's fear that you might do damage or plant some sort of a time bomb before you walk out. You know, there could be a number of reasons, right? But it's a very big cultural difference. And so I'm sure for some people, when they heard you say, like, oh, 3-month notice, like, what the?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. 3 months is probably one of the longer notice periods I've ever had.
Sure.
But I think that the kind of standard in the UK is 1 month. 1 month's notice for most. What I've discovered is the further you go up, the longer the period tends to become. For that reason, to help you kind of find a replacement and all this kind of stuff.
Now, is the opposite extended too, where a company would be like, "Hey, we're going to eliminate your position, but you have a month to find a new job"?
I don't think so.
They can. So like during your probation period, for example, you can get. I think I had a week's notice. So within a week, they would say, right, we want to let you go in a week's time. That'd be it, right? So you'd get that kind of week's notice, so you can at least get your affairs in order. After your probation, they would give you the same notice period that you have to give them. So if you're going to be, I mean, when I was made redundant, it was a case of, you don't have to work the rest of the day. Like, you can go home. That's fair. But no, like if they are going to let you go, they're meant to give you that same notice period. But again, it's not that is a hard and fast rule. I think even in the UK, you can say, no, I'm leaving and I'm leaving today. I won't be back in tomorrow. But then you will suffer the idea of they can maybe withhold pay, I think, and stuff. So that kind of thing can happen.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
All right. So from the cybersecurity engineer job, was the next position where you're currently at? All right.
Yeah.
So what do you do today?
I work as a senior network engineer for a NOC, for a managed service provider.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is everything that I wanted it to be. Which is the good thing. Like, I was saying to you earlier, like in the week, that I'm looking to progress still. It's not like I'm stagnant and I'm going to be staying here, but I have missed this dive into technical learning and gaining experience through all these different platforms. And one of the best things that I could have picked is I picked a Cisco partner. That was a good step right there from my point of view, because I just love Cisco. I think they've got some incredible stuff out there, and yeah, there's other competitors and they're fantastic as well. I got to play around with some Juniper stuff and some Fortinets, all this kind of stuff. They're all great, but I just love Cisco. It's been my way in. I've taught it. I understand it. Like, it's just, it feels like home. So like when I got to work with a Cisco Gold partner, and now they've had their master specialist certification as well in networking. Mm-hmm. So like, it's a phenomenal company, and I get to play around with all sorts of new technologies that I never would have dreamed of playing around with. So it's just phenomenal. I love it. And then, get to troubleshoot my ass off.
I think MSPs get a bad rap in that they're, thought of as being very fast paced. You get no breaks, everything's on fire all the time. Would you say that's accurate? It
is accurate to an extent. Like, we have a good team so that, fire is distributed evenly. But, I guess it depends on what kind of you want to learn. Like, we, around the same time that I started, another chap started now, he left after just, again, pace was maybe a bit too much for him. And he would do really, really well as a network engineer for a company where he managed that network probably. And like, he could know everything about that one network and he'd be phenomenal at that job. But I think when you have a managed service provider and you have to go from dealing with a DNA issue for 5 minutes to then jump into, well, this is now an FMC managed on CDO, and you have to learn all these different things, and you have to jump from one network to another in a heartbeat, that can be really, really challenging. And that's not for everyone. But if you want to learn, which I really did, then it is the place for you. Like, because you will learn so much in all these different networks because you're forced to switch on a dime, as you guys would probably say, to be able to go from this network to another and disassociate what you were thinking about 5 seconds ago and start working on something completely new as well. And I think that's really one of the best things about being in a managed service, is that kind of constant changing of environment, that you're never kind of too comfortable, which can lead to getting bored.
That's true. It's one of those things where I've never worked on MSP before, but when I do something, I have to focus, like to shut everything out, and I am zoned in on what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine having to like switch back and forth and still be able to perform and do the detailed work that you need to do. So that's amazing to me.
I think one of the best things about it, like I say, is as the senior team, I have more leeway to spend more time on a case. So the only time I really need to jump into something else is either A, to help a colleague out and just be like, all right, well, what's happening? Let's see if we can figure it out together for a few moments. Or B, something's just gone on fire and they need me on it. Like, so normally it's a case of I get to sit down and work on it. So I spent all day today looking at a weird ice issue, like just trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, figure out what was going wrong. And that was my day today. There was a couple moments where I had to help out with some firepower stuff and generate some logs for some people. But then mostly I was focused on the ice stuff that I was working on today. And like in the senior team, as you go up through that kind of layer, like again, you get to spend more time on an issue rather than having to be so frantically jumping from case to case, which is what we're kind of experiencing in the service desk and our kind of front lines. So.
Makes sense.
All right, Ian, with our last little bit of time here, I want to pivot to your content creation on My Mind's Madness and kind of understand more for our listeners. What kind of content do you create? What are you putting out there into the world? And what kind of people are you, trying to attract with your content?
Right now, trying to attract people who just want to change their lives with the CCNA. I mean, the CCNA has done so much for me. It's changed my life. Getting into networking, it's made my life completely different. And I found it very late. And I just want to help people kind of get into that as well and be able to change their lives and get into a career that they can build. Like I've had lots of jobs. This is a career, and I appreciate that very much. So any help I can do to get anyone on that kind of page, I really want to do. As for the content itself, I started off with just these kind of cheat sheets. I think I've done as much as I could at the time. There's lots of them out there. You can get them on our website. They're done as just general files on GitHub as well. So I've got a bunch of repositories where I store all these kind of things. My blog as well. I do a lot of lab-based blogs and walkthroughs, like how to configure HSRP, how to configure DHCP snooping, all these kind of things. My recent blog, though, was just on RadKit, which is awesome. We can talk about that after if you want. But the kind of main bread and butter of my day-to-day content's my daily CCNA question. Mm-hmm. So every day on Twitter and LinkedIn, I just post a simple poll question, which should be similar to the kind of thing that you would find on the CCNA. And it's just that idea of micro engagement with content should help you learn and pick up on tips and tricks. And I will try to throw the occasional curveball in there that will put in, as we call it, Cisco English styled questions, right? Try to confuse you with words.
And that they do.
So yeah, I tried to put in a few of those, but for every question that I put up on Twitter, you can actually access them all for free on our website, mymindsmadness.com. I've got them set up as a just generic form, so you can do them in banks of 30 roughly, because they do them by month. So you can fill them out, get feedback on every single answer as well, not just the question in general, but if you select the wrong answer, it has an explanation as to why it's the wrong answer and all that kind of stuff. So that's as free as I can make it.
So are these questions that you've developed yourself?
Yep. Every single one. Like I typically these days, originally it was I'd maybe spend like 10 minutes a night like trying to come up with a question, and then the next day I'd answer it and try to come up with another one. But these days what I do is pretty much every Saturday I kind of sit down for a couple hours, write out a bunch of questions, get them loaded into my kind of pre-population app, and then load them into my Microsoft Forms as well with all the answers and questions so that they can be loaded onto the site when they're all finished. And yeah, been doing it for 2 years now. So there's over like 600-700 questions on the site that you can just access for free, like get general feedback on all of them, which I think is a great free resource. But
that is beautiful. That's fantastic. I mean, I knew you had I did not realize it was 700 deep. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's because if you do it, it's been 360 odd questions for the last 2 years. So yeah, I must be up to about 700 by now. If I'm not, I'm close to it, if anything.
And so are these questions at all in line with like the current CCNA syllabus, which includes a little bit of automation, virtualization, and things of that nature?
Yeah, I do my best to make sure that I try to cover the topic. Like often when I'm coming up with the questions, I have the syllabus in front of me, so I can try like cherry pick some things out. But what I have been doing this year when I started back up is that every week I focus on a different area of the 6 syllabuses. So I've had this week off just because I've had a nice little annual leave and I've not done any questions this week online, but I'll be starting back up again for Monday. And we should be right back to like network fundamentals. And then the week after that, it should be connectivity. The week after that should be switching. Yeah, so I'm trying to make it that you've got 7 solid days of questions on a particular area. And mainly in the hope that anyone who's studying that particular topic that week can hopefully hit some good questions. And then again, you can pull them up on the website and just go through the whole banks of them if you want. So the only thing I will say about the banks is that I do nothing to weight the percentages of the questions. So like automation's worth like 15% of the exam, I think. I don't do anything that says like, right, in these 30 questions, there's 15%, which is automation, 10%, which is security. So I don't do anything like that. It's just as many questions as I can think of, I just throw out there.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Oh, that's fantastic. Now I know you're big into troubleshooting.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking earlier about some fun stuff that you've done with Packet Tracer. Can you explain a little bit more on that?
Yeah. Firstly, I want to come to Packet Tracer's defense. A lot of people shit on Packet Tracer.
I was one of them for a long time, but a few years ago they did a huge revamp of Packet Tracer, and they have really done a nice job with that. I mean, I dare say that if you used only that to go for your CCNA, you would be just fine. And that was certainly not the case a while ago.
That's true. Yeah, like they certainly did a revamp, and I'll be entirely honest, if you're going for your CCNP or expert level stuff, like it's not going to cut the cheese for you. It's just not good enough. Right. There's the commands that it doesn't allow. It is a simulated thing. It's not an emulator, that whole argument. But if you are going for your CCNA, it's more than enough. And it's got loads more in it anyway, like the ability to build like your entire smart home program, your coffee pot and all this kind of jazz is all built into Packet Tracer these days. There was an argument a while ago, like, why do we even call it Packet Tracer anymore? It should be like renamed because of all the extra things that it can do. Like you want to teach your kids how to code, they've got a blocky form of coding inside it. So you can pull up you can pull up your coffee machine and you can start pulling in your blocky kind of programming. So you could say if morning brew coffee, so you can do things like that. So you can really, really good for those people who are just starting out. I like it because I can create assessments on it. Like I can do actual labs that give you percentages of scores. So if you're the things that I was telling you about, I've built 10 troubleshooting labs, all based on the same topology, all giving the same generic symptom. Like one of the things that I really hate when you're learning any content is that normally you'll study OSPF and then you'll study how to troubleshoot OSPF. You don't find out how to study how OSPF is the problem. How did you come to that conclusion? Yeah. Mm-hmm. How is that the thing that led you to OSPF so that you can solve that OSPF problem? And that's something I think a lot of people when they're first starting out really struggle with. So I've built these 10 labs that are all identical. And basically the issue is DHCP doesn't work. Okay. 10 different reasons why, 10 different scenarios, 10 different scopes, all in the same topology. And the idea behind that is just like, it shows you how even a simple topology can have so much wrong with it. And the main thing that you need to do with troubleshooting is identify the scope. Like customers are very bad at coming up and saying like, this is broken. Or my favorite one is everything's down. Like, everything's down. Okay.
That's every ticket we're talking about.
And you know why customers do it. They want attention fast, so that make it seem like it's a P1 when it's not. But it's just what the customers are good at. Sometimes they can be incredibly vague. And your job is to find that scope of that issue. Is it actually that everything's down, or is it just this one network that can't communicate? Is it just from here to here that doesn't work, but here out does? So that scope is so important. And I remember when I was teaching troubleshooting, like the first question to ask is like, what is actually impacted? What can ping? What does work? What doesn't? Because I do find that troubleshooting half the time as well as finding out what the problem isn't. It's not just about finding out what the problem is. Like, and that works as well when you have a massive fire that's happening. And people can be very keen to throw out a ton of ideas, like say, oh, it's the network, it must be the network, it must be the... If you're the person that can say, it can't be that because of this reason, and normally it's a very logical reason that people can't, debate, then that regains control of that conversation into your favor as well, which is really good when you're dealing with customers or big messy calls. But Back to the packet tracer. The idea that I can make an assessment that says like, right, so there's X wrong with this lab, make the change and you score points and you get like 100%. I think in 2022, I did like a troubleshooting lab challenge where it was just one big lab with 20 issues scattered across it. And if you got the full 100%, I got a Boson software voucher and stuff. So I was able to give away some prizes for that. So I was thinking about doing that or something similar again this year.
All right. I like the sound of that. Well, I want to take a moment to remind our listeners that if you are enjoying the show, please share it with a fellow network engineer. And one thing that always helps us is rating us wherever you find us. If you can rate us on Spotify, leave a review, Apple Podcasts as well. Anywhere you find us, give us the old thumbs up, stars, however they rate us. That really helps the podcast mojo, helps other network engineers find us, and we do appreciate it. Ian, before we let you go, are there any questions we should have asked you that we did not?
Radkit.
He's focused.
That might be another episode all its own.
I'll do a quick thing. So it's just an awesome network management tool. Like, let's just put it in that front. And I've had a lot of fun. If you want to read more about it, I did a kind of non-technical blog on it the other week, and you can find it on our website. So.
All right. Speaking of blog, where exactly can people find you?
mymindsmadness.com.
All right. And you're on Twitter, so at mymindsmadness.
Yep. LinkedIn as well.
Where else? LinkedIn.
Okay. If it's not My Mind's Madness on LinkedIn, it's myminds.madness. It's just
okay.
So
right.
LinkedIn and Twitter are my two kind of main places at the moment, but you can also find me on like Instagram, Blue Sky as well if you look for all those kind of things. But the two main places are Twitter and LinkedIn.
Well, we will collect all of those links and pop them in the show notes for this episode, so that way you can easily find Ian and My Mind's Madness and make sure you follow him everywhere that he is and you are. Ian, we talked briefly about doing a little bit of a giveaway when your episode drops. We don't have all the details set around that, so I won't discuss that here on the podcast episode live. But make sure you're following Ian and our Twitter as well. And we will post some details around the time that Ian's episode drops here. And, we'll give something good away to some aspiring CCNA students. So, Ian, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate you sticking it out until the wee early hours of the morning for you. This has been a really, really fun conversation. Cheers for having us. Hey everyone, this is AJ. If you like what you heard today, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Smash that bell icon to get notified of all of our future episodes. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Art of NetEng. That's Art of NETENG. You can also find us on the web at artofnetworkengineering.com, where we post all of our show notes. You can read blog articles from the co-hosts and guests, and also a lot more news and info from the networking world. Thanks for listening.